Alrighty, this is going to be a fun one. I'm going to be reviewing the PQ at Rogue State Games, which I attended and took down with Qi'ra Data Vault. I'm going to break down my whole run in that event, and I'm also going to talk about the deck list, which has a few changes since my Qi'ra deep dive video from a few weeks ago. So you'll see the new list and the changes and why I made them. On top of that, I'll also be talking about my opinions on the current meta, talk about what I think are some of the best decks, what are some decks that are kind of dropping in terms of their power level in the current meta, and then some risers as well. And I'll break that all down. So before we get going, please hit that subscribe button. And if you're looking for some more content from me, do check out my Patreon as well. All right, so let's start. Table of contents. What are we doing? We're reviewing my PQ run, my deck updates, and like I said, the meta recap. But before we do any of that, let's shout out the store, Rogue State Gaming and Hobbies. This is in New Jersey. Very well-run event. It was an 88-person PQ. Didn't notice any hiccups really during the whole thing, so really liked it. And you can see that photo of the promos down below that they handed out. These were like custom made. The art here was made by one of the locals there, Meg, and each attendant came in and received a pack with these promos, and they are absolutely awesome. They're printed on nice stock too. I thought this was pretty cool. Yeah, like this art's awesome. So like, yeah, everyone got a set of these. Just wanted to shout that out. Okay, so you see, I did ran Qi'ra Data Vault at this PQ. It was a 7-round PQ, caught to top 8. So started with round 1 with Array Data Vault, and I have heard some rumblings about how this is a very bad matchup for Qi'ra. I'm not gonna like really comment on like whether or not I think one is favored or the other. I think it's kind of too early to tell. Data Vault, which I will talk about a little later, is a pretty new deck into this meta. It's not something I had played a ton with. I did prepare a decent amount into it before this event. But game 1 I lost, and like no one likes to sit round 1 and lose. I don't talk about bad draws very often, but I did not play a card on turn 2 or turn 3 in that game. I played Inferno 4, put 2 cards on the bottom, missed my turn 2 play, missed my turn 3 play, basically got run over in that game, but I was able to bounce back, and there was basically the coolest thing I've ever seen happen in a game happened in this game 3. So I played an Architon's Assault Cruiser in this game. It's a sideboard card that I've added into my deck, and I ate his blue leader with it, which then ramped me. I got to take that blue leader and put it in my resource row. Later in that game, my opponent played a tech, which I then traitorist and took that tech, and then I was able to smuggle out the blue leader that I had stolen from my opponent with that tech, and it was just like a very weird and kind of funny sequence of events. And this my opponent was actually Neum Islau from McClunky Gaming, so it was a pleasure engaging in that battle. Round 2, Anakin Colossus. This is a matchup I feel pretty comfortable in overall. I think just Anakin is not usually going to be able to rely on his leader to kind of close games out against Qi'ra, and then once you get past that Anakin mini game, your top end is mostly just going to be better. I did a good job keeping that Anakin from 6 power, which is important because I was able to ambush kill him with Maul, which means Maul gets to live, which is annoying for the Anakin player, of course. And yeah, I was able to take this down 2-1. In games 1 and 2, he was able to match my ramp with a Cham Syndulla. He won one of those games. And that can be sometimes difficult for Qi'ra to manage, especially because Cham himself is a threat to the Qi'ra flip because of his 5 power. Round 3, another Ray, this time Tarkentown, my buddy Derek. I feel like these mid-rangey hero decks, typically it favors Qi'ra. I think the villain pool of like the Vader barrage stuff is just very good into these decks. Ray does feature a bit of a discard package, and game 1 he didn't have a turn 1 play, unfortunately for him. That game he kind of lost control of that game pretty quickly. Game 2, a pivotal moment was when he pillaged me when I had 3 cards in my hand. I really wanted to keep my Vader, which I couldn't play that turn. It was only 5 resources, but I had a Lone Pike, the one Lone Pike that I have in my deck in my resource row, which allowed me to keep my Vader in my hand. I believe it was Vader. not 100% sure, but keep a very good card in my hand, smuggle out that Lone Pike, which is a very difficult card for these hero blue decks to deal with because of its 4/6 stat line, and that really swung the game because I was able to deploy a very powerful unit when he was going for my hand. All right, round 4, back to another Ray, back to Data Vault, and just able to grind these matches up. Basically, I feel like the card quality in Qi'ra's higher. It simply is. It's the quantity of stuff that Ray spits out constantly. The cards that draw cards, right? The cards that make multiple cards, like Ewing and Home 1, and that's how they're trying to overwhelm you. But if you're able to manage the early, like 4 to 6 resource turns, going to 7 with a relatively unstable board, and you can get into your Vader and Mauls and kind of take control of the board, it can be difficult for them to recover from that. It still takes a very long time to kind of win after that, but the games you lose are the ones where you don't, like, you're always on the back foot, and then, like, you can't stabilize off of your big units. Your Avengers are bad. Your Devastators aren't even amazing because there's just too much stuff in play. But if you're able to control it through that 7 resource turn, it becomes very manageable, and you can just kind of grind them out. You just keep killing all their units because their units are weak when they come into play for the most part, and I was able to take this one down 2-0. Round 5 was against another person I know, Lewis from New York. He was on Hantu Green, 30 health version. He was playing like a go wide style Hantu Green, so like a Maz Kanata aggro version. My early game plays lined up pretty well into his with like Pike Sentinels and Death Troopers and just ways to kind of like clean up a little bit. And I was able to like stabilize around the Qi'ra flip turn without too much damage on my base in these games. And from there, especially in this particular version, like for Qi'ra, without the threat of ECL coming down and like a POA record to kind of like nuke your board, I didn't have to like worry about that in this case, and was able to take that one down 2-0. So going in to round 6, I was 5-0, paired against Sabine ECL. This is Michael from a team across the galaxy, a teammate of the person Will, who won the Richmond sector with Sabine ECL, and I won game 1, but then he took the next 2 off of me. He made some really clean plays on like preventing me from ever really hitting a barrage, things like heroic sacking his Sabine leader into my Qi'ra, for instance, just to get her off the board, knowing that I wouldn't be able to set up a board clear, and he was able to take this down 1-2, 2-1 against me, and that was my first loss on the day. Going into round 7, I was 5-1. Me and my opponent was also 5-1. We decided to ID, and this, with our 5-1-1 records, we did both make it into the top 8 cut. From there, more Sabine, right? Another member, Nick from across the galaxy, Sabine ECL. I was able to take this one down 2-1. He did in the game, pivotal game 3, he did miss a turn 1 play, and you know that is incredibly rough for Sabine in this matchup, in basically any matchup. It just happens sometimes. The deck does play a lot of turn 1 plays, but math is math, and you know, when you mulligan, you sometimes end up in a situation like that. I then went to the top 4, and this was Michael again, the same person that beat me in the Swiss, but I was able to get my redemption here, 2-0 versus Sabine ECL. Now, did want to shout him out because myself, my opponent in the finals was actually a teammate of mine, Alex. We both already had our buys for the Galactic Championship, so it does pass down to the 3rd place, and that was Michael, the person that I beat in the top 4, so he gets his invite to Galactics. And the final, you know, Alex was playing Han Green. He conceded this game because neither of us needed the buy, and it was very, very late, and the games also weren't being streamed, so he didn't feel like there was much incentive there, and I get the 2-0. I will talk about that matchup a little bit. Han Green, we've played it a bunch. I can guarantee you, because I like making up matchup statistics, it's about a 61.43% favored for Qi'ra matchup. Now, obviously, but I feel like it's a pretty close matchup. When the Han Green kind of identifies their role. I think if a Han Green thinks they are just like a go face aggro pilot deck in this matchup, they will lose a lot more than they win. I think they need to prep for a bit more of a grind game, rely on going wide a little more. Their best opener against you is resupply. It's like old school like casino version of this deck. Of course, they don't have the same cards those decks do, but they get to do things like Ewing into like a Chewbacca plus a 2-drop, which is like really, really powerful into Qi'ra. If they can ramp early and like really apply pressure that way, it's really good. They have ways to one-shot your Qi'ra on flip with like Han and Blue Leader. So definitely tools for the deck. I just think it's mostly a trap if you just try to go like Falcon, Chewie, go ham into the Qi'ra. They'll basically just take some damage, put you behind once they find like a Traitors or Glory or a Barrage or something, and then you'll just be kind of like out of cards and like not out of board control at that point. So usually I think the best lines here are not to like just try to like pilot aggro them out. All right, and that's the end of that discussion. So let's talk about the changes I made, and I'll put up the deck list in a moment, but these are changes that I made ever since my video from a few weeks ago. Now, some of these changes were getting like tweaked over time, and anyone on my Patreon would have been seeing like my live updates, but this is where I landed on currently. So I cut an Inferno 4 from the main deck, actually went down to 11 turn 1 plays. This is a lot to do with the fact that in many matchups, I'm comfortable not playing a card on turn 1. Even when I open with a card on turn 1, I'll often resource them because I don't feel like I need to play a card on turn 1 and go down in card advantage that way. I cut the 2 takedowns. You know, I've never really loved this card in Qi'ra. When I went to 60 cards, I felt like I just needed to like up the removal count a little bit, and that's why they were there. They're also there because you don't ramp all the time in the 60 card version, and it's nice to have a 4-drop. But there's other things you can do on 4 at this point, like playing 3/3 Sentinel and shielding it, or playing the 3/5 Sentinel, or like, I don't know, a Lone Pike, and just piecing together some other stuff. And it's still just a card that I think almost always trades down in value, either by having to defeat something that costs less than 4, or defeat something that has already given your opponent value by like ambushing into you or like attacking into something. So don't love the card. Could see it making a comeback. I also cut the Rivals Fall. I do actually still like having a 1 of this card, but its best matchups are Cad and Anakin. I feel pretty favored in both of those matchups with Qi'ra. So in that case, we don't have to have it. It would be nice if we had room, but I needed room for a few other things. And see that I added 1 Restock, 1 Lone Pike, 1 No Glory, which would be the 3rd, and 1 Relentless. So I was cutting 3 removal, so I decided I thought No Glory was just performing better than most of this other removal. Gives you more outs to like the Chewbacca stuff, so kept that. And then Restock Relentless I'll talk about in a moment. 1 Lone Pike, you know, I just missed having a smuggle. This guy actually played really well in a couple matchups I mentioned in the Ray Tarkentown matchup with the Hand Hate. It's a good card into Quinlan. It's a good, like in the Ray Data Vault, it came up in a matchup when I was just able to like, you know, they were preventing me from getting a good Barrage turn. Just slam a Lone Pike. They can't really kill it. It's a 4/6. Blue hero decks can't really interact with that particularly well. It's just a decent card. I almost ran 2, but I opted for just 1. Now, Restock Relentless. So why is this here? Well, it's not for hard control. I promise you that. I would not be playing these cards main deck to target that. Hard control is not a very popular archetype right now. Incidentally, it's good there, and like I wouldn't be conceding game 1 into hard control anymore because I have a Restock and Relentless in the main deck. In fact, I think you basically are just favored. You're now a 60 card Vigilance Restock deck against their 50 card version. You have way more threats than they do, and you have all the removal you'll ever need for the very few threats they present. So I would feel pretty favored, but again, that's not what this was there for. It was there for the mirror, and there's a lot of different angles right now that you can try to take with the mirror match in Qi'ra. It's just become a very popular deck now, the Qi'ra Data Vault specifically. It won a lot of PQs. It's performing well at sectors and regionals. So it's just, in my opinion, one of like the 3 tier 1 decks right now. So you need to expect mirrors, and how do you tech for that? And some options have been like Annihilator. Just try to go like even bigger, like 1 Annihilator to main deck or something. I think Relentless, of course, is a pretty good mirror card. It's also just aiming to go bigger and like have another card that can kind of brick them. You just have to like be careful how do you manage your Relentless, right? You can't play it into Avenger, and you can't play it into a Devastator. So you have to find a way to have 2 units in play and shield it. But once that happens, if you're able to get a turn where you're able to like play a 2-drop, play Relentless, shield the Relentless, yeah, you sometimes just win the game. So Relentless, very good. Why restock? So 2 days before this event, I started playing a lot of mirrors, and I hated them so much. I don't love this mirror match. I used to actually kind of like the mirror match when it was like ECL, like slightly more aggressive versions of this deck. The problem is there's so much like hard removal between like the events and the like big ships that just remove each other that it's very difficult sometimes to actually apply any damage in this matchup. And a lot of them were going into mill. And by mill, I mean like decking out. Like running out of cards was often just the win condition. And it became kind of obnoxious because whoever's vigilance performed better randomly, right? You discard the top 6 cards, you hit one of your opponent's vigilance. You're just probably ahead now. Like for the rest of this game, it's very difficult to recover as long as neither player is like doing anything like awful in their gameplay, or maybe you both hit a vigilance but one person hits like a devastator avenger. Right now you're down 2 giant threats and stuff like that. So I played a bunch of these without the restock, and I was just like splitting games, and it wasn't like I was just decking out or winning because they were decking out first. Not that many games were being resolved with damage, which is still possible, especially if like one person outramps the other person, or like mauls can come in for like multiple bashes through like a super laser tech, and then you're like up in this damage race, and all of a sudden you can flip that mill war, because if you are very ahead in that damage race, then and you're both like decking out at the same time, then you of course will defeat them first. But yes, that still revolves a little bit around the vigilance decking out issue. And if you're the one playing restock and they're not, you're just going to be very favored unless they hit your restock with the vigilance. But it's basically like one more copy of like a mirror breaking card. And I prefer it to Annihilator. I think it's just cleaner. It's basically useless in any other matchup other than like the hard control stuff as well. But Annihilator is also mostly useless in most matchups other than like maybe like here, like the Ray Data Vault deck, you might be able to get to like an Annihilator in that kind of matchup. But restock I think is just better in the mirror than Annihilator is. You also have to remember that Annihilator can get no gloried, and then like the trigger resolves under your opponent's control, so that can be a bit of a downside there as well. I think I opted one restock, one relentless for the mirror. I did not play any mirrors and basically boarded out. I think I boarded out the restock in every single match. Is what it is, right? Like it's sort of a punishment. It's the same kind of stuff that like boss blue decks would sometimes just have it in the main deck for the mirror, because like if you don't, you just lose the mirror. And I'm not sure you just lose the mirror if you don't have restock, but I do think it puts you ahead if you do. And you know, maybe after I talk about this, more people will be playing restock, and then all of a sudden you might have to one up the restock. Sorry if that's the case, but I ran it. I'm telling you why, and you can make your decisions. In the sideboard, we did have some changes here as well. There was a no glory and an extra relentless in the sideboard. Those both are in the main deck, so got 2 slots that way. And I also decided to just cut the 3 top targets. They weren't performing as well as I would have liked into Sabine, so I was trying something new, and that was Lieutenant Childson in the sideboard. Now we're just like pumping Sentinels for days. Once again, I had a game where I was like, I'm set up for a 5/5 Childson, and then I drew 2 green cards off the top, and he was only going to be a 4/4. Lucky for me, I kept a AT-RT, perimeter AT-RT, so I played it instead because the 5 health was more important than the 4 power on Childson. He did also do okay in another situation where he was a 5/5. He kind of forced a heroic sack off a Cassian into him to get him off the board. He's okay. I'm not sold that he's going to be the best version. I want something here for the Sabine matchup. It's just trying different things. Client is another one I'll probably be working with. I didn't love it so much in the 25, like the ECL version. It was tougher to like get it set up and going, but with the extra life pool, it might be a little easier to get Client online and kind of like, you know, maybe he's not actually healing 5 because everything attacks you first, but he's like maybe healing 2 a few times, and that can like add up, right? He's also a shielded unit that can sometimes provide some value in combat. And then lastly, and probably like my favorite new addition, is the Architon's Assault Cruiser. And this card was crazy good against Ray Data Vault, which is, and I played that twice. This is the home 1 killer. Now, he didn't actually kill any home 1s in this. So he killed a Bright Hope and he killed a Blue Leader, but he is the home 1 killer. He's a 7/8 ambusher. It will swallow a home one and curve you into a Devastator and leave behind a massive unit, 7-1. To remember, these decks, like villain, not villain, like green blue hero decks, or even like Han, right? Like this is also very good against Han green. It's just that now there's a couple home one decks, and these decks don't do like chip damage into units. So a 7-1 assault cruiser, it's just another thing they probably have to spend a card killing. And if they don't, it's another guy that you can barrage off of. And what's really important is the ambush here, because you get to like action cheat. And it's really important in these matchups because it's difficult sometimes when you have to like set up something like, okay, I'll play Reinforcement Walker. Okay, well, that might set up a next turn barrage or something. But if your opponent just does like Fell the Dragon plus play another unit, well, you're just like falling behind on board. And having an ambusher here to just like immediately get the value is incredibly important. The ramp is really nice as well in the matchups that it's good in. So very good card into the Raid Data Vault deck. Very good card into Han Green. Not something I was thinking about boarding in the mirror, to be honest, because it's a 7/8, doesn't kill any of the capital ships. It is just like a big unit. But I think the trap actually in this mirror sometimes is boarding out too many of your like mid-range units. Even random things like AT, RT, and like the 3/3 Sentinel. Like these cards matter because you have to be able to like play a unit onto an empty board that you don't want, like that like you aren't worried about getting like Avengered or Devastator, right? Like you need to force your opponent to actually like play their bigger thing first. A lot of time, and having enough of these like mid-range units is nice. So like I think cutting even more of them for something like an assault cruiser might actually weaken your deck overall in the mirror, because it's not actually killing anything. So it's just like a generic unit, and then you like play that and it gets removed, like your 8-drop gets removed by like an Avenger or Devastator, and that's like a much bigger deal than like you being able to do like an ATRT, and then maybe they play a big thing and you have like Power of the Dark Side and you can like basically win that transaction, right? All right, here's the deck list visually. Yeah, I talked about it all the changes that I made. It ran pretty smoothly. I likely will iterate on it further, but yeah, I liked it as is. All right, let's talk a little bit about the meta as a whole. Gonna do this pretty briefly. Yeah, Tier 1. I think this is pretty clear for me at this point. I think these are the 3 best decks in the game. Sabine ECL, Qi'ra Data Vault, Han Green, and yeah, like this is, I think it's pretty healthy. Like this looks like an aggro control and like mid-rangey deck. Han probably skews a little more aggro as well, but it's like a different kind of aggro. But yeah, these are the decks, the top 3, I think, really in performance and maybe in play rate. I think Han might not be played as much as some other decks, but I do bump him because I just think he's better than the decks that might be getting played more than him. He also had a pretty good results this weekend. So Sabine, you know, this might be the best positioned Sabine ECL has been in a very long time, maybe ever. I think it's just a very clean deck right now. It doesn't have any auto losses. It really is just like incredibly consistent, one of the most consistent decks possible. And yeah, you have power cards, you have ways to claw wins in situations that a lot of decks don't. Qi'ra, kind of like the de facto control deck right now. I don't think this has a bad matchup into hard control, despite what I hear a lot of sentiments about. Also, hard control is almost entirely absent from the metagame. Like by that I mean like Boss Blue, Iden style decks. But no, they don't eat up Qi'ra. If you know the matchup well enough, if you have your sideboard planned for it, you have options like conceding game 1 and boarding into a very, very powerful post-board strategy. You have the option that I had, which is like just have the Relentless in the main deck already with a restock. And there are a lot of good lines this deck can take into Bosk or Iden and stuff like that. It's also a pretty consistent deck. It can beat Sabine, right? That's a pretty close matchup. It can beat Han. It's also pretty close. I think it mostly beats most of the hero mid-range decks. There are some that I'm still kind of undecided on, and especially some of the newcomers like Rey and Han 2, which I'll talk about in a little. You know, I don't have enough data. Like and by data I mean like internal testing data to make that conclusion yet. And of course we don't have like a ton of actual statistical data, but we'll kind of have to keep tabs, right? Because new decks are now going to hone in against these three here, right? Like, and Han as well. I think Han is a very interesting deck to play sometimes because it really is kind of two decks in one, right? It's like a ramp U-wing deck, and it's also like an aggro space race pilot deck. But I think you really need to know what matchups you're supposed to be doing what in. And too often I see people just play Falcon, play a pilot on it, try to bash face forever and lose because they overcommitted. And going tall with pilots is not always the way you want to play this deck. In fact, the deck only plays like 6 to 7 pilots in the first place. That's already a tell that it is not like the only thing you're trying to do. Actually, it's a little more pilots because Poe counts, although sometimes I don't think of Poe as a pilot because usually he's just better played as 2 units at once. But yeah, like Han, you know, that resource cheat is still maybe the most broken leader mechanic in the game. His flip turn is still enables one of the most broken plays in the game, going from 5 to 7, potentially as early as turn 3. Playing a 7 drop on turn 3 is sometimes out of control powerful. And yeah, I think these are the decks. Like anything new you're trying to test, these 3. Those are the first 3 I would run with. All right. Meta update trending down. These are some downtrenders in my opinion, and 2 of them are Tarkentown decks in Quinlan and Cad. And we just lost the best Tarkentown deck in Django a few weeks ago with his suspension. So Tarkentown not nearly as represented anymore. Why do I think these decks are trending down? Quinlan, because I think he's unfavored to all 3 of the decks I just talked about. Yeah, like I think he's got not like crazy unfavored. Like Quinlan's never crazy unfavored into anything. It's why he will still be a meta presence. It is not a bad deck at all. But when you're looking for tiny edges, when you're looking for winning like giant tournaments, and you expect that maybe the three of the 5 most represented decks will be Sabine, Qi'ra, and Han, you have to ask about the Quinlan matchup a little bit and like what it is that you're gaining. Because yeah, like in my testing, those from both sides, right? I've played a ton of Quinlan. I took that deck to Denver because I thought it was very well positioned pre-Django ban, but post-Django ban, the decks that kind of clawed up are posing problems for Quinlan in very different ways. Like Sabine, Qi'ra, and Han are all like fighting in very difficult and like different ways for Quinlan to tech into. And is still able to win these games through hand hate, especially against like Han and Qi'ra, not so much against Sabine. Against Sabine, it can be very difficult to get them, but like stuff like Bamboozle can be incredibly important there to help with your races, well-timed hot shots and surprise strikes to try to close the gap, right? Like the issue with Quinlan is it's kind of a death by 1,000 cuts. It often does have enough damage to win. It just takes it too long, too many actions to get all its damage in because its units hit for like 2 and 3 most of the time. I also think he's a bit unfavored to the deck next to him right now, which is Cad Bane, which is another deck that I think is kind of on the downtrend for similar reasons. I don't like the Sabine matchup. I think is pretty close for Cad Bane. I don't think it's that unfavored for Quinlan either, maybe slightly. But once again, I think Cad into the other 2 that we just talked about, Qi'ra and Han, he unfortunately is unfavored. And again, he is like he also has way more issues than Quinlan into like hard control decks, which I know are not very popular right now. And again, I don't think this is a bad deck. It has much less tools than Quinlan to deal with like control via hand disruption. It's basically just Bazine loops with McClunky. There's not a lot else it can do to really effectively target the hand. Its best ways of winning these matchups are just like denying barrages, being able to like hit for like 4 to 6 damage a turn while like capturing a unit and like stalling like that, and then just like getting in every turn and like and hope to like that's enough. Super Laser Blast is an issue sometimes for this deck, but of course it does have Bazine. These are 2 Tarkentown decks though that I just talked about, and Tarkentown is definitely not as prominent as it was earlier in this meta game. In fact, Data Vault I think is like superseding it now. Maybe ECL is as well in terms of base play rate. That I'm not 100% sure on. I didn't look at the stats. It's just like anecdotal feelings, I guess. But it does open up some strategies potentially that were really struggling into Quinlan and Cad if their play rates are coming down. And the last one that I think is trending down a little bit is Anakin. You know, I've never been incredibly high on this deck, if I'm being honest. It is powerful. I think its win rates, especially against something like Sabine, will vary drastically of whether or not it goes first or second. I think that's a big thing for this deck. I think the 30 health version at this point is what I would prefer to play versus Colossus. I think that being down that card is, especially against a few decks like Quinlan, against Qi'ra, that 5 health isn't going to matter. So like that extra card very much could. There's just like a lot of matchups where I don't think that health is significant enough to offset the difficulty of your opening hands and how clunky they can get sometimes, and the kinds of hands that you're forced to keep on a 5 card. Like you can't mulligan as aggressively with a 5 card hand. You basically have to keep anything that's even remotely playable, because you could mulligan into a complete brick. I think Rey is kind of outperforming Anakin in terms of these like blue mid-rangey decks. I know he's a red leader, but he's basically always paired with blue, and she's a blue leader, right? And I think she kind of does it better because she's able to like use more tools with like card advantage engines than Anakin can. Anakin relies on its ability much more for its card advantage engine, which is more situational than the way Rey does it. And Rey can also stabilize against aggro, I think, much better. Anakin's way to stabilize against aggro is flip the leader, kill their opponent in like a turn or two. And that's, you know, when Wrecker can one-shot you, it can sometimes be a difficult road into Sabine. But none of these are bad decks, and none of them are going away. So it's not that these are gone. You don't have to prepare for them anymore. In fact, I think Quinlan will still be one of the most represented decks at big tournaments because, first of all, it's kind of fun. It's also like a deck that doesn't have any like truly unwinnable matchups. It really made up stats again, but it really is that like 45 to 55% deck, like in terms of win rate. Its matchups don't get much worse than that, maybe like 40, 60. It's not like a deck that has like a 10% win rate into stuff. And, you know, I think it still has like one of the most powerful cards in the game and Force Throw in it. So Quinlan, I think its play rate will stay pretty stable. Cad and Anakin, their play rates have never been crazy high. I don't know if they'll go down a little, but I think what I'm saying here is mostly that I think their overall position in the meta is a bit down. And lastly, trending up, we've got Rey and Han. So Rey specifically in the green version. This deck is really interesting to me. This is like basically brand new from like a little over a week ago, right? So Joshua Freeman Birch took this deck, Rey Data Vault, to a regional and placed top 8 with it. The day after, a local of mine, Pasquale, took a deck, Rey Data Vault, that he made to the Connecticut PQ, which was at the time the largest PQ so far. Is like over 110 people, and he won that PQ with Rey Data Vault. And like basically after that, this deck just got kind of popular. Like 2 solid performances, and bam, this deck is kind of like in the meta now. And this deck, if Quinlan is death by 1,000 cuts, this deck is death by 1,000 tickles. This plays an absolute endless supply of bad units just forever. Mon Mothma, Akbar, C-3PO, Sundari Peacekeeper, Bright Hope, Regional Governor sometimes, R2. It's like one for the tribe deck, and it plays them forever. And it really is a quantity over quality kind of deck, and I do not mean that as an insult. It's just playing tons of units that replace themselves. Rey makes them into actual units with her ability, and then it has its true bombs, which are Luke and Home 1. Those are like the real cards. U-Wing, of course, can find the Luke, or it can find a bunch of bad cards, but a lot of them, right? Like U-Wing, Mon Mothma, C-3PO, Village Protectors. Mon Mothma draws me a card. C-3PO maybe draws me a card, right? Like this is the kind of stuff this deck does, and does incredibly well. 33 life really helps here. It's not the kind of deck that gets punished too much by going 10 over, because most of the cards are pretty redundant other than the Ewings, Home Ones, and Lukes. And of course, you would like to draw those more, but good thing you draw infinite cards in this deck. Mon Mothma can find Home One. It can find Luke. C-3PO can draw cards. Bright Hope can draw cards, right? I'm sure that Yoda, if you're playing it, can die and draw cards. There's like ways to like endlessly loop and grind your opponent out and just get that chip damage in. It doesn't really need to force base damage. It's just like got a lot of restore built in. Very good turn one opener against Sabine is like the clone. The 2/3 restore that you can play for 1 and she can immediately give it a token. 3/4 restore 1 on the ground is really good because it kills any of your opponent's turn 1 ground units if they start on the ground. And then if they don't, well, now you have an unchallenged restoring unit that can chip away. Remember, you have 8 more life than your opponent, and that actually really, really matters in Sabine games for a lot of decks, right? Don't forget, you can turn the corner on them pretty quickly if they're only at 25 life. So this deck might be the quickest I've ever seen like a new deck become popular, because within like 1 weekend and really just 2 results, top 8 at a regional, 1 a PQ. It's not like it won 9 events in 1 weekend. Just from those 2 events, this deck became like a meta force, and now decks need to adapt to it, right? Like I very quickly picked up that this was probably going to be popular. Bam, 2 Architans Assault Cruiser went in my sideboard. That card, it wasn't just for Rey. I knew it was already going to be good into something like a Han Green deck, but I was like, well, now we've got another Home One deck. Now I think I can justify including this in my sideboard. And other decks will need to evolve too. Also, learning the play pattern, right? It's a new deck. If you've never played against it, you might not know how to fight into it. And I'm not fully like experienced into fighting into it with every deck yet. And I don't even know like what the matchup spread is for this deck yet, but it's something we'll work on. And the other newcomer would be a Han Solo 2, and this is mostly played in green, and there are kind of 2 different camps in this one. There's like a go wide aggro deck, which is usually played with something like Maz Kanata, 1-drops. More often I see it with ECL, but it can be played with 30 as well. But you'll see like Poe, Wrecker, like it's something like a Sabine spinoff, but it plays more small units, goes wider because it can use Han's ability to like almost always play 2 units on turn 1, which is a really good start into a lot of decks. Then there's the Data Vault version, which is basically like a rampy style big monster deck. It plays, of course, things like crates and Home Ones. Really good card with Han is the Hammerhead, especially if you're playing draw engines in your deck like Mon Mothma and Bright Hopes, because Hammerhead, a turn early to kill something and present a giant space threat, is really, really powerful. One of the best units in this deck is the Poe Dameron Pilot, which you can play on turn 2 as either a 3/1 on the ground and a 2/2 in space, or just a 4/5 space unit on turn 2. Really nice synergy there. Of course, the synergy with Champ Syndulla against ramp decks is crazy because they play resupply. You can play 5/2 resupply. That's pretty powerful. It doesn't always line up, but those games, oh boy, do they feel good. And yeah, so it's like kind of 2 versions. Now the Cham is probably playable in the go wide version as well, so there is overlap here. I think the main distinction would be like the go wide version is doing like Maz Kanata 1-drops, and the big version is not, and it's going to be playing like more mid-range threats like Home One, Hammerhead, things like that. I don't know which one of these decks is better yet, and maybe they'll both be present, but I think another reason that this guy, Han 2, young Han, is becoming more popular is what we talked about in the trending down section. Tarkin Town decks are less popular right now. It's not that this was could never beat a Tarkin Town deck. I don't think that's really the case with Han 2, but it certainly could be a problem if your main strategy is like, I want to play 2 guys on turn 1, and you're just like, and they just like Tarkin Town one of them immediately, right? Or you try to cheat out a unit, and they just Tarkin Town. Like if you're relying on that ability so heavily in the early game, and you're just giving your opponent free kill and losing tempo. But those decks are a little less popular right now. Han has had some time to like reinvent himself a little bit, especially the Go Tall Data Vault version. The other deck has kind of existed in the past. I know that the fellows from Swoop Racers, which is another YouTube channel, some Polish players have played this go wide ECL Han to a lot of success. They did it in the last set. They did pretty well with it in the regional. And now though, the newer deck is probably like the Han Data Vault deck, which is big Han, and both are really interesting. This is also a pretty grindy deck. It's another home one deck if you're playing the go wide version. It's not the go wide, the go tall version. And, you know, maybe that Architon's Assault Cruiser is going to become pretty popular, not just in Qi'ra decks. Maybe a lot of these green decks, I mean, both Ray and this Han deck could play it as well to like combat each other. So I think that card might be a bit on a upswing coming soon. All right, that's what I got for the recap of my event, for what the meta update I got for you. Let me know what you think of the new meta. Let me know what you think about some of these new decks. And until next time, take care.